Right, let's now bring in Professor Peter Baur. He's an economist with the School of Economics at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. We want to talk then, of course, about the Government of National Unity and tomorrow's State of the Nation address. Now, market perception of the GNU has in the main been very positive. This will, of course, be President Cyril Ramaphosa's first SONA under the GNU. What then are your expectations and what are you hoping, to hear in that address, keeping in mind, of course, that there's also concern around economic improvements in the country?
Yes, we already seen a huge increase in the, shall we say, the business confidence index that has been growing over the last year. We also seen a slight decrease in unemployment. This could be also associated with a slight drop in interest rates that we are seeing. And also, I think our international standing being present, but from the 1st of November 2024 to the end of the year on the G20. So these are all key factors. But what we also need to really look at is how do we bolster and build investor confidence? This is going to be a big part of our agenda. We need more investment in South Africa, more focus towards privatization and obviously business development within the South African context. And we need to look at strategies. And I think he will definitely address this. How are we going to overcome the huge challenges that we're having with the current unemployment rate in South Africa, which, I mean, even though it is coming down, it is still not obviously low enough. And obviously associated with that are the issues of inequality that we're experiencing in South Africa, the big wage differentials, and I mean this inequality can go through to education inequality and other challenges. So, and also what is happening in the United States of America right now, aid flows to some of their member countries. One of them, like for example, the US aid, and obviously South Africa being a beneficiary of US aid. These are things we need to look at. How we are going to be addressing very specifically attracting or at least building up our relationships between South Africa and obviously the rest of the world.
And I want to touch on what you talked about in terms of inequalities, particularly on unemployment. I mean, this year's SONA does come at a time when South Africa is faced with a high unemployment rate, as you've been saying, standing at 32.9% in the third quarter of last year. What is also of concern is that even those who are employed are battling to keep their heads above water. To what extent then does the medium-term development plan address some of these issues, a plan that we've heard, in previous speeches too?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a very significant point. The cost of living in South Africa is increasing. We are seeing that. Consumer confidence index is coming down. So households are experiencing the pressure. And the cost of living is very, very high. And of course, it's not just the overall cost as in what we are paying for our living, but it's also what we are getting back for those costs that we're paying. So we're going to, and they all tie up with very much things such as, the current interest rates that we're experiencing in the country, the level of inflation. And I mean, inflation is coming down, but the low levels of economic growth are critical on this agenda. We need to drive that economic growth. And then associated with that are things such as your costs of energy, electricity prices, petrol prices, and then access to the infrastructure to be able to use and this was mentioned in the previous presentation now, our infrastructure, our railway networks, our roads, and the costs associated with that. So I think for households, the costs of living are really, really important now. And of course, the cost of education is extremely high. And these factors, and we are seeing, the inequality, just the educational inequality that we're experiencing, those with skills versus those with unskilled, there's a massive wage difference between them. So how do we better support our educational institutions in order to drive the quality education that we need in this country to again, further drive the growth and then further alleviate the unemployment?
And I mean, there's so much, in terms of what you've just said, especially in as far as education is concerned, when you consider those budget cuts. Now, of course, SONA is of interest, but what is also going to be of significance is the budget that follows thereafter. So just bearing that in mind, how then would South Africa be able to navigate and keep this balancing act considering, all of those challenges that you've just mentioned?
Yeah, and the biggest challenge for the budget that's going to come afterwards is a very high level of debt to GDP that we're currently sitting with. And we need to try and manage that debt better because the debt is costing us a fortune of our taxpayer money. So instead of money being invested inwards into development strategies or policies or plans, even if we mean developing like funds towards expanded public works programs and other key economic structures, we're losing a lot through the interest on those debt repayments. And so the restructuring is really important, because on the one side, we do need to spend on our infrastructure. We need to put money into our educational bodies, our healthcare sector. All of these are really important, because without those key fundamental investments into both education and health, the return of employment to economic growth is going to be compromised. So we've really got to relook at, we've got to spend. The spend is there, but the tax base is very, very small. And so the challenges of mitigating against debt on the one side and spending on the economy. I'm hoping again for more relief from our central bank to hopefully alleviate some of the pressure on households, and that might make it as well. If we can stimulate economic growth, and there are great opportunities for growth, more jobs, which means a bigger tax base, which means again resolving towards these problems. But a lot ties up with what is also happening internationally, the great uncertainty that we are now starting to experience, including, as I mentioned, aid. Funds, etc.
And I want to touch on that point. I mean, you bring in that dynamic then of the external international factors that we need to consider. So how concerned then should we be as a country in light of the recent remarks, firstly on social media by US President Trump, that the US will be cutting funding to South Africa? There's concerns following that this will also impact, of course, on trade relations and essentially threaten AGOA, or the African Growth and Opportunity Act later this year. I think it goes for renewal in September.
Yes, and that is a very big concern for us. I mean, as long as we are on the AGOA, it's a favorable trade agreement between South Africa and, of course, the United States. And the United States is a very large market. We cannot underestimate the significance of our export market to the USA, and of course, goods that we are importing as well. But this plays a role for us. We as long as we are in a favorable relationship with the United States, just in terms of markets, if we lose ground in terms of those favorable trade agreements that we have with the United States, that's a large share of our market that we could potentially be losing, which is going to simply translate right away to additional unemployment challenges in South Africa, and again, slowing down our economic growth. So for us right now, it's about building stronger and better relationships, even though we are facing such incredible levels of uncertainty. And uncertainty is just not between South Africa and America, but it is also between the relationships between America and its direct trade partners, like, for example, what is happening with Mexico and Canada and the European Union, and the trade wars that are now developing, which just simply means that while globally the economy could be doing a lot better, this is going to slow the global economy down, and in turn is going to slow down trade exports from South Africa to other countries, not directly the USA, but maybe the European Union and China, which then could also impact our shall we say, current economic situation. What is really important for us, I believe, right now is to really start working on developing stronger relationships with the other countries, building better relations with China, the European Union, South America. We've already developed a really good relationship with in terms of the BRICS relationship, but there a lot of emphasis needs to be put on in order to foster, anchor, and stabilize those trade relationships, given the level of global uncertainty and possibly the higher costs of living associated with these trade wars that we are now starting to experience, at least the beginning of.
Absolutely pertinent points, Prof. A lot, of course, to consider. South African government being very hopeful that the G20 presidency will allow them to get those relationships back up with the United States of America. Well, plenty to watch and see and monitor then, Prof. Thank you so much for your time. Professor Peter Baur is an economist with the School of Economics at the University of Johannesburg, just weighing in on the significance, of course, of the State of the Nation address that we will be hearing tomorrow evening from President Cyril Ramaphosa.